Hello guys, my name is Helmar from Iceland. I ended up in the 5th place worldwide in FPL last season, so I'm here today to talk a little bit about that. I'm gonna pick one favorite moment of the season and one mistake I've done for the last season. I've actually been playing this game for 10 years now, and the first 6 seasons I ended up in 1 million plus. And the last 4 seasons I've been in top 100k. And last season I ended up in the 5th place. So I'm gonna see if I can get any higher this season. Okay, I'm just gonna go straight to the favorite point of my last season, which was actually in the beginning of the season. I'm gonna share the screen with you here. As you can see, my first game week didn't go so well. I got 39 points, ended up in position 4 million. So it was very bad game week, the first game week for me. But in the second game week, I got 128 points. And as you can see, I used the same team, the same captain, and everything the same. I didn't do any transfer, or I just trusted the team that I chose for the beginning of the season. So I'm gonna talk about what I learned at this point was, I could have used my wildcard after just one game week. I've seen many managers do it, but I strongly recommend to just be patient. Trust this team that you chose for the beginning of the season and just see how it goes for 3 or 4 game weeks. Maybe you have to use the wildcard in after 5-6 game weeks, and that's okay, but I strongly recommend to just hold on to it. If you will have to need it for later on, and other chips as well. Throughout the season, there are gonna be some double game weeks that you have to use your chips, or I think you should use them at that point. So I recommend to just trust your squad for the beginning, see how it goes, make some few changes, but don't rush into using your chips or anything like that. So that's my favorite point of the season, and actually got me to position 40k, so that helped me throughout the season. My least favorite point of the season, or my mistake of the season, was that I never played Dominic Calvert-Lewin this season, but I owned him at one point throughout the middle of the season. I actually bought him straight after one game week. I think it was around game week 25 or something. I bought him right after the game week because he was gonna go higher in price the day after. So I just bought him. Then I saw Everton was playing a cup match the same week, and I just, it's not good. But yeah, I trust it because Calvert-Lewin hasn't been injured for a long time, but in that match he got injured, so I had to sell him right away, and I used 2 transfers for then one player. I think I bought Danny Ings instead for a couple of game weeks. So I recommend to wait with your transfer if the teams have, especially if the teams have cup match that week, the same week. It's better to wait with the transfers till after that, because players can always get injured, as we know. All right. So that was my mistake of the season, and there was a few other mistakes. It actually surprised me a lot that ended up so high. I thought you had to do absolutely everything right and make no mistakes, but believe me, you can make a few. I would like to talk then a little bit about this time. I mean, there's 6 days till the season, and what I think, what I'm thinking now. I am looking at the preseason. I'm looking at the matches that are been playing now, and I think every team has played 3 or 4, maybe 5 games in the preseason right now. So I like to just see how the manager are setting up their team, because of course in the preseason managers are trying to play every player and give the youth players some chance and everything, but you can always see some player are gonna be outstanding maybe and score 5 goals in 4 games or something, and then you can see, okay, this player has just costs 4.5 million, and of course he's gonna have chance in the beginning of the season in the first games, so maybe I should buy him. I actually bought Wilfred Zaha, as you could see in my first game week. I bought him after I saw he scored 4 goals in 4 matches, I think, in the preseason for the last season. I started to look at him and decided to buy him, and my friends actually laughed at me. But he ended up being one of the best players in the first 7 game weeks of last season. So that's very good for me to have him, and actually he was pretty much a differential last season as well. All right, then I would like to share some tip. Maybe the most important thing that I did last season was that I used my money on the bench. I put some money on the bench. I would recommend it now because of the situation. You never know, like now when the coronavirus is still over us here, you never know if the matches are gonna be postponed. So I strongly recommend to have players on the bench who plays for sure, and maybe some good players, I mean, who can get some points for you. I recommend to have these players on the bench. Don't use 83 million on the squad. I don't do it. To use 83.5 millions on your 11 players, then you just have 4 millions for a defender, 4.5 for midfielder, 4.5 for forward, and you can't get any players for that. You are lucky if you can get players who play parts of the time for that money, but I recommend to have playing players on the bench, because you never know if some matches get postponed. Then it's better to have it. Like last season, when Manchester United and Liverpool game got postponed in the middle of the game week, I saw many players just got, or many managers just got 8 players on their who actually played, because the bench was pretty much dry. I got 11 players that played. There were 3 players in Liverpool and Manchester that I had, so I actually got every player on the bench playing, and that filled in. So I strongly recommend that. Maybe I go through, in the end of this video, I go through my bench and through my goalkeeper position. I would like it. I would actually, other tip, you have to play by the feelings and play your heart, of course, but when you choose, try not to choose by your favorite team. I mean, my father-in-law was starting to play this game now, and he is a Newcastle fan. When I saw him pick his team, he picked 3 Newcastle players, and I was just like, oof, you know. So I recommend to try to avoid picking players after your favorite team. It's always fun to have one player from your team, but yeah, actually you won't get many points maybe from it. So yeah, tip number 4, don't lose faith in the beginning of the season. Like I said before, just be patient and be aware of rotating teams. Manchester City and Chelsea are the highest risk, I think, for that. You have to be sure about the players who are gonna play. You want to have players who play. That's my rule number 1. Have players who play. I mean, last season when Manchester City did win the title, I think there were 7 or 8 game weeks left. No, 6 or don't remember, 6 or 7. Then I just got rid of every Manchester City player. I just think I had one Gundogan then, but I just got rid of him because I knew that Pep was gonna rotate and use the best players in other leagues. They were in, I think, 4 competitions. So I recommend to look at that as well. All right, then I'm gonna go through my team as it looks now. In the end of this video, I'm gonna go through the goalkeeper position. I would like that. I like I said before, have playing players on the bench. So I spent 9.5 million in goalkeepers. That's, I mean, if you spend 5.5 million in your main goalkeeper and 4 million in a goalkeeper who doesn't play, then you have 9.5. I think 9.5 is just a very good. I don't recommend to use a small amount of money in the goalkeepers, just because then you have one goalkeeper playing and one who's not playing, and then maybe the game gets postponed, and then you get into trouble. So my first choice of goalkeeper is Kasper Schmeichel, the Leicester goalkeeper. If you look at the last 3 seasons for him, he played every single match. Brendan Rodgers is not rotating goalkeepers. I think he would not do that even if Leicester had won the title. Like last season when Manchester City had won the title, then Ederson got rotated. That's pretty, yeah, no one would expect it. So Schmeichel has played every match the last 3 seasons. He is one of the top goalkeepers of the league, I think. He got over 120 points for the last 4 seasons in FPL. Leicester also has very good fixtures for the first 16 fixtures. I think there are 3 fixtures in the first 16 that I don't want to play him, and that's against Chelsea, Manchester United and Manchester City in game week 4, 8 and 12. All right. The other goalkeeper I have is Robert Sanchez. He's very cheap and is very good goalkeeper. I think Brighton has good defense and they can keep some clean sheets, so he will be on the bench for me. Why will he be on the bench? It's why in game week 4, when I don't want to play Schmeichel, the Brighton team are playing Brentford. In the game week number 8, they are playing Norwich, and in game week number 12 they are playing Aston Villa, which is maybe the one game that I don't like to play in. But I mean, I have 16 game weeks with very good fixtures for these two goalkeepers to play together. If Schmeichel is, I mean, if the Leicester defense is struggling in the beginning of the season, maybe I just put Sanchez in and buy some other option for Schmeichel, or just leave him for a couple of matches and see how it goes. So this is the goalkeeper's choice. There were some other Schmeichel. 5 million for Schmeichel is very cheap, I think. There are some other options for 5 million. I saw Pickford. He actually interests me after this summer, but after the European Cup. But I just don't trust him and the. Oh. Okay, all right. Then the bench. I have, of course, 3 players on the bench, like everyone else. I have Ben White from Arsenal. I think Arsenal, they are buying a defender for 50 million. This is not a defender who is not going to play. They're always going to play a player they buy for 50 million. So, of course, you don't trust Arsenal's defense, but you can always play him in the first matches against Brentford. So he will be the first choice for me on the bench. Then I have Rafinha, number 2 on the bench, which surprised many, I think. But they are playing Manchester United in the first game, and I believe in Manchester United's defense this season. So I just don't want to play him in the first match, but I think I am going to rotate him in the team for Game Week 2. And then other player will go on the bench, but he is very good as well. So the third choice for me is Bissouma, who is a Brighton midfielder. He played for 3,112 minutes last season, so he almost played every match. And he is the cheapest choice for the midfielders. He's in 4.5 cost. So I have Robert Sanchez in goalkeeper's position on the bench. I have Ben White, Rafinha, and Bissouma. This is very good options if someone not play. Like, look at the first game week, Luke Shaw. They are talking about he has a small injury. Maybe he don't play the first game week or first 2. Then what are you gonna do? If you have the bench, if you have not playing players on the bench, no one will fill in that gap. So you have to have good players on the bench. I think it's very important this season as last season. That's the most important thing I did last season, was to have playing players on the bench. So yeah, I think I'm done for today. This was that I like to talk about. Of course, I could talk more about everything last season. I actually would like to share the team with you that I chose for this season. I'm one of the players who choose some teams, some players a month before, and changed it 50 times. I think there are several more players out there, or managers, who do that. But I am very confident about my team this year. So I would like to share it with you. And if you subscribe to this channel, then I will come back in a few days and talk about the rest of the team. Also, you can comment on this video if you want me to talk about anything specific from last season or for this season. So, thank you guys.
Hi everyone, welcome back to another video from FPL International, FPL tips for fans around the world. My name's Josh, I'm in Mauritius. Please let me know where you're from in the comments section. We love to know that we've got viewers all over the world, And we want to promote the fact that this is a global game that can be enjoyed by anyone, anywhere. Today's video is going to give you tips to build your first squad. So thinking about the start of the season, thinking about what's different, and just helping you plan for your game week 1 squad. If you haven't subscribed already, please consider doing so. We're nearing closer to that 1,000 subscribers mark, and we'd love to get there before the start of the season. You can help us do that. It's just a click for you guys, and it really means a lot to us, so we'd appreciate that. My first tip is don't get too excited about new signings. So when you've got a player coming from a Premier League club to another Premier League club, you sort of know what to expect from them in FPL. But when you've got a player who hasn't played in the Premier League, even if it's a really good player, an exciting signing, you're not exactly sure what to expect. Sometimes they can take a lot of time to settle in and even adapt to the Premier League playing style. Sometimes they're not going to play straight away. Their manager wants them to understand, how the team plays and get used to that before they do start in the first 11. And this is the same sometimes for players from the Championship, although not so extreme, I'd say. So when you've got a player coming from the Championship into the Premier League, it's not such a extreme transition. So I would say if you're going to go for a player who has not played in the Premier League before, I'd lean towards those who have been in the Championship. They're used to the English game, and there's a bit more understanding about that player and how they're going to adapt to the Premier League. My next tip is look for tips in pre-season. So there are pre-season games that will be happening soon, and just keep an eye on those. Keep an eye on how players are performing, and especially just if they're playing consistently. This is a good indicator of if they're going to be playing in the Premier League. Almost all players will play, one pre-season game at least. But those who are playing consistently are probably in their manager's long-term plans. So especially if you've got a player who's cheap, and the reason they're cheap is because we're not sure if they're going to play or not. If you see that they're getting a lot of minutes in pre-season, that's a good indicator that they might start in the Premier League games as well. And then also look for players who are playing out of position. So, the positions are already fixed in FPL, but if a defender, for example, is playing a more advanced role in pre-season, that's another, really good indicator that they could be a serious asset in FPL that season. So look out for that. But don't just base it on pre-season form. Obviously, look at their form from last season and the season before that. It's important that you have a consistent performer in your FPL team. Next tip is pick players who you know are going to get minutes. So often people are tempted to get these really cheap bench players, and it's inevitable that at some point during the season, your first 11, one of them won't play due to injury. It could be suspension. They could just not be in the manager's plans for that game. And then if you've got players on the bench who are getting 0 points, that's, you're going to have a 0 in your team, and there's nothing worse than that. So I would go for cheap players for my bench, but I would make sure that they're at least going to play, 90 minutes. So 2 points is better than 0. And then there's always the chance that, if it's a defender, they could get a clean sheet. If it's a midfielder, they could get an assist or a goal. The same for a forward. So definitely don't pick players who are not going to play just because they're cheap. It's really not worth it. My next bit of advice is really important. It's about splitting your budget and sensibly, sharing it around the squad. So in defense, usually you would go for 2 keepers who total between 8.5 and 9.5 million. So that would allow you either a cheap 4.5 keeper who's going to play every week and a 4 million keeper who's probably not going to play. But you are going to stick with that 4.5 keeper long term. Maybe throughout the whole season, you might want to make a transfer at one point during the season. You could do the same with a more expensive keeper, maybe a 5.5 million and a 4 million keeper. And one good idea is to go with a keeper from one team and then the backup keeper from that same team. So if your first keeper doesn't play for one reason or another, the backup keeper should take their place. So you're always going to have a goalkeeper who's playing. It's pretty bad when you've got two keepers who are not playing, 0 points again. And obviously there's only one substitute goalkeeper. Your defender or midfielder on the bench can't take their place. So the other option for goalkeepers is to have two goalkeepers who rotate. So they could be 4.5 million keepers, both of them. And when one plays at home, the other plays away, and vice versa. So you can always have a keeper playing at home. For defenders, look to spend somewhere between 23 and 27 million for your 5 defenders. So you should go for possibly 2 premium defenders, maybe 3 if they're not premium, these expensive 7 and 7.5 defenders. So you could manage with 3 at about 5.5 million and then 2 cheaper ones. Think about it, to be honest, during the season, you're likely to only have 3 players in defense most of the time in your starting 11. So, it's not worth wasting money spending 5 or 5.5 million on a defender who's going to be on the bench most of the time. So think about that. But like I mentioned earlier, have a defender on the bench who is going to start, just so you've got that to fall back on in case one of your first 11 doesn't get any points. Okay, on to the midfielders. This is where you want to spend a lot of your budget. So somewhere between 40 and 47 million on your 5 midfielders. This is because midfielders are the highest scoring players in the game, generally. I think the last 7 seasons or so, the highest scoring player has been a midfielder. And on average, midfielders score more points than any other position. So I would go with 2 premium midfielders. This is because it's good to have a captain to pick each week. But then if that captain is not going to play or has a really tough game, you can fall back on the other one. So a couple of really expensive midfielders, and then the others just sort of like gradually getting cheaper. So somewhere in the middle, sort of like a upper mid-priced, a lower mid-priced, and a budget midfielder. It's good to have different midfielders at different prices. This is going to help you with transfers later in the season. So if all your players, for example, are around 7.5 million in midfield, and you want to get in a premium midfielder, it's difficult to do that. You take out one midfielder, you've only got 7 or 8 million to spend. You have to take out 2 and then get a more expensive one and a cheaper one. And it's just a waste of a transfer. So try and have midfielders at different price points. This shouldn't be your priority, but it's just something that will help you later in the season. And then your forwards, you want to spend between 20 and 27 million. It all depends on what money you've spent elsewhere. So if you're spending more in midfield, you're going to have to make a sacrifice and spend a bit less upfront. That's how FPL works. So I would go with either a premium forward, a mid-price forward, and a budget forward, or just 3 mid-priced. You can get very good value on some mid-priced forwards, especially those who are going to play week in, week out for their team. So like I mentioned, sometimes you do have to make a sacrifice. You may be able to spend a bit more upfront, but in midfield or defense, you'd have to cut back on your expenditure. So it's up to you, but my main tip would be to spend a bit more in midfield. Those are the players that score more points, and you're likely to want to have 4 or 5 of those midfielders in your first 11 each week. So I would spend a bit more there and look for the budget options elsewhere. My next tip, don't get excited about players and just get them in before you've looked at their fixtures, especially at the beginning of the season. This is a good time to really spend time looking at the fixtures, thinking about who's going to score well, defenders that are going to keep clean sheets, forwards who are going to score, midfielders who are going to be allowed to be creative. So look carefully, especially at the fixture difficulty rating. So you'll notice that fixtures usually have a difficult rating of between 2 and 5. Sometimes it's color coded. And this is going to help you to look at teams who have favorable fixtures and maybe target the players from those teams. Don't concentrate just on this, because after the first 5 or 6 games that you're focusing on, things can change. So you do have to go for players who are going to be consistent throughout the season, but maybe a few different players who other FPL managers won't have because of their fixtures. And that can get you points where others are not getting them. Finally, don't worry. Don't take too many risks and think you have to do something different at the beginning of the season. You've always got a chance to use your wildcard. And a lot of FPL managers use their wildcard quite early on when they've seen new players, players from the promoted teams, just players who are having a good season compared to others. So sometimes game week 4 or beyond is a good time to use your wildcard. Sometimes during the international break, or sometimes when the fixtures look like they're going to swing and, a couple of teams who had easy fixtures are then having difficult fixtures. And then other teams who have had a tough opening few fixtures, their fixtures are then becoming easier. So that's a good time to use your wild card as well. So don't worry, you've always got that wild card to change your team if you need to. And it's always exciting using your wild card once you know the form of some of these players and just the form of some of the teams and a few things that are happening that no one expected at the beginning of the season. Okay, those are my tips for making your first squad. I hope it's been useful. If you like this video, please give it a like and don't forget to subscribe. We're getting close to 1,000 subscribers now and we want to get there before game week 1. You can help us do that. We'd really appreciate that. Okay, I'll be back with another video soon, but for now, stay safe.
Yes, it's your boy Lanre coming to you from the UK with another FPL International video. It's game week 1 of the season, so we've had a nice long break. Hope you've enjoyed the Euros, all the friendlies, all the transfer news and gossip, but it's down to business now. Game week 1 of the season, and I'm going to take you through my draft team. And just remember, this is just a draft, so a lot may change between now and Friday. But let's go. So at the back, we've gone with someone that was pretty much an ever-present force in our teams last season, Emiliano Martinez of Aston Villa, probably one of the highest scoring goalkeepers in the game last season, and we're hoping that this season he'll continue that form. As backup, I've gone with Robert Sanchez from Brighton, who's at 4.5 million, dirt cheap, and is probably going to play. Brighton, they're not going to score many goals. They're probably not going to let in too many goals either, so he's probably a good shout. And then in defence, I've gone with Diaz of Man City, someone that couldn't necessarily fit in my team last season due to his price, but I'm getting in there early this time round. I've gone with Luke Shaw as well. Now Luke Shaw had a really good season last season. He was an ever-present for Man United and just really kind of just excelled in his position. He's also coming off of scoring in the European Championship final as well, so hopefully his confidence will be on high and he can continue the good form into this current season. Ben White is my third defender, and at 4.5 million he is dirt cheap. Arsenal have just spent a load of money on him, and he's probably going to be guaranteed to play in pretty much all of their matches. So that price point is just too good to resist, to be honest. I've gone with Matt Lowton as my other defensive pick from Burnley. And Burnley, we know them by now. They're really solid defensively. They might start the season off a bit slowly, but they're pretty much guaranteed to pick up form later on. And I've got Matt Lowton there, 4.5 million, another good price point for the defender. And then rounding off my defenders, I've gone with Luke Ayling of Leeds. Again, another 4.5 million pick. Had a really good season last season. We'll be hoping that he can carry on that form this season as well. And then in midfield, we've got the two big hitters. First, Mo Salah, obviously. We know what he can do in FPL. He's been an ever-present and a very consistent player over the past 4 seasons now. 12.5 million, so he is very expensive, probably one of the most expensive players in the game, but he's pretty much worth it. He's owned by 50.6% of FPL managers, so I mean, if you haven't got him, then you're really missing out.
Then we've got Bruno Fernandes, 12 million, so another expensive midfielder. He had a great first and second season, to be honest. Tailed off towards the end of last season, but that was probably due to fatigue. He did score in Man United's friendly last week, so we're hoping that this is the beginning of a good start to the season. So with that, we've already spent 24.5 million on 2 players, so we're going to have to go with a few cheaper options in midfield. So I've gone with Basuma of Brighton, 4.5 million, guaranteed to play pretty much, but he's kind of more of an enabler. We've also gone with Buendia of Aston Villa. Now, previously we would have seen him tearing up the defences for Norwich a couple seasons ago. Now with Villa, slightly better team, and hopefully he can turn all his potential with Norwich into a lot of points this season for Villa. And then finally we've got Stuart Dallas. Now you'll notice that last season he was a defender. Now he's been reclassified as a midfielder at 5.5 million, relatively cheap. However, obviously that reclassification will probably diminish his points potential. So he's kind of like a question mark in my team at the moment. He might be coming out, he might stay. I'm not too sure, but we'll leave him in for the minute. And finally, we have our strikers. So we've got Tony of Brentford. Now coming off of an explosive season in the Championship and scoring in the playoff final, he'll be hoping that he can continue that form and take it towards the Premiership. We've also got Obafemi of Southampton at 4.5 million, dirt cheap. Southampton have lost Danny Ings, as we know, and they'll be looking at Che Adams as their main striker, but possibly Obafemi could be there pushing and hoping to establish himself in the first team. Regardless, he's really more of an enabler, so we can get in the next guy into our team, which is Harry Kane. Now, Harry Kane, we all know his head's being turned. There are rumours that he didn't necessarily want to play for Tottenham this season. We were thinking that maybe he might go to Man City, and that could still happen. But Man City have just spent a load of money on Jack Grealish, so that might impact their ability to also buy Harry Kane. So I've got him in there as a placeholder because potentially, we know that Romelu Lukaku has signed for Chelsea. He doesn't actually appear on FPL as of yet, but I am waiting for his price point, and then it's likely that I could substitute Kane for Lukaku because we all know what Lukaku can do in the Premier League. He's been in the Premier League, played for a number of teams before, and always scored goals. So I've got Kane here, but it could well be Romelu Lukaku. So there you have it. That is my FPL Game Week 1 draft team. Obviously, a lot could change in the next 48 hours. So I'll be keeping an eye on the team selections, keeping an eye on transfers, and we'll see what happens. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you have any sort of players that you think I've missed out on or glaring omissions in my team, then please feel free to put a comment below. We are FPL International, so like and subscribe to our videos and you'll be receiving content as and when we put them up. All that's left to say is I've been Lanre from the UK, and stay safe.
Hi guys, it's Jason from FPL International, and I'm here to talk about my draft picks for the coming Premier League season. Lots of signings, the transfer window is still open, so it's still an exciting time in the league. So let's get the show on the road. In goals, I have Martinez from Aston Villa for 5.5 million. I feel like he had 15 clean sheets last season, and he did lead me to a league win in one of the groups I'm in. So yeah, fun times ahead. In defense, I have Luke Shaw. I feel like he had a prolific season last season and a prolific Euros, and I expect him to continue where he left off from last season. Alongside him, I have Diaz from Man City. I feel him and John Stones will make a formidable partnership this season, and they're going to have a very good partnership together. I think they're going to do well. Alongside them guys, I have Trent Alexander-Arnold. I know Liverpool didn't do too well last season, but I think he's going to have a better season this time around. Maybe he's got his head on straight. Hopefully he'll get more assists. In midfield, I've gone with Jorginho. He was Chelsea's top scorer last season, but I think he always has something to contribute, especially from the penalties. So he's going to contribute a lot more this season. I think, especially with them getting Romelu Lukaku, they should have a lot more opportunities to score goals, and I think a lot more spot kicks. So Jorginho is a definite must. He's had a great Euro, had a great season last season and a Champions League final, and he just won the Super Cup, so I think he's on a high. Alongside him, I have surprise package Jadon Sancho. I think with Rashford out for the next 2 months, I think Jadon Sancho will play a lot more for United and start games, and he's my surprise pick. So I think he's going to start off on the left side and Mason Greenwood on the right, but I expect him to perform because he's a good player. Alongside them guys, I have Mohamed Salah and Bruno Fernandes, 2 quality signings that I think will boost my team this season. Up front, I have Barnes, Iheanacho and Cutrone. So I think with Jamie Vardy getting into his latter years in the Premier League, and he's still a Premier League legend, but I think he's going to play a lot less this season, or maybe be hitting the bench a lot more. But with Iheanacho and Patson Daka at Leicester, I think they're going to do well together, and I think Iheanacho is going to score a lot more goals this season. Don't forget, this is just my draft team. My sub-keeper is Tim Krul at 4.5 million. I think he missed the Euros, but Norwich did get to the Premier League with a big helping hand from him, pun intended. I have Aarons as well from Norwich, played very well. And Shane Longstaff from Newcastle to make up the numbers alongside Manquillo. And that is my fantasy draft pick. So guys, I'm sure we will send you our final teams once they're done. So all the best to all of you this season, and good luck to everybody out there. Let's have a great season ahead.